And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we're talking about NBA rebuild rankings. And so we're going to be looking at an ESPN article and where they rank the Chicago Bulls in their rebuild. We're going to be talking about if the Bulls are making real progress or are they doing much of the same. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Bazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about the Bulls rebuild or retool, however you want to look at that. Are they making real progress or is it more of the same? And so if you have not got a chance to see this, you can head over to ESPN.com to read this. This came out actually a couple days ago. And so just to let you know, before we jump into the actual rankings for the Bulls, it does give you this note before you go into the article that their rebuild rankings are not based on where rosters stand right now. Having more present day talent doesn't automatically mean you're further along in a rebuild. The list focused on the combination of current talent and future upside. So it tells you that before you go into the actual article. And so I'm going to be paraphrasing this. And so it breaks it down into a couple different sections on each teams. And so you have the strategy, is it working? And then the estimated return to relevance, which we're going to talk about that. And so starting with the top at the strategy. And so the first thing that they point out is that the Bulls have been a play-in team, which is the obvious here, clearly getting bounced by the Miami Heat last season, drafting Noah Singay. And so the next part, talking about the expected improvement from Miami, Philadelphia, and Toronto. All these teams finished behind Chicago last season. And just saying that the Bulls will have a chance to go out and, get a pretty good draft pick or a game-changing talent in next year's draft pick, despite not doing much to put themselves there. And then it also talks about the cap space for the Chicago Bulls as next summer, they're expected to have some good cap space, even with re-signing restricted free agent Josh Giddey, which that is something that AK talks about a lot with the cap space and everything else. And then when it's talking about is it working? And so it mentions Kobe White and how he has turned into a key contributor for the Chicago Bulls. And they are talking about the 140 rule there, where it's saying that the Bulls are not likely to extend him and talking about his contract. And so that's something that we've talked about there. And then with Modest Bazelis and then Noah Singay, the Bulls are definitely going to have to bank on this potential for the long term. And then just talking about how the Bulls will need to hit on a high pick and just talking about Patrick Williams and really just how that really hasn't necessarily worked out here. They picked him number 4 in the 2020 drafts, and so we know about that. And then the estimated return on relevance here. And so this is what they say to close with the Bulls, and this is why they are picked 11th out of 14th on this list. It says that the Bulls, with little high-end talent and lower chances of getting a top pick than several of the teams below them on this list because of having more overall depth, are one of several teams far from relevancy in the Eastern Conference. It'll take some significant changes in approach, luck, or both to change that. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start with the very top. And so let's just start with the positives here, because the first thing that you have to look at is that the Chicago Bulls have 10 players that are going to be under 25. And so the Bulls have gone out and they've definitely made the team younger. Next, when you look at the tradable first round picks, this is a good situation that the team is in. You do have draft capital, and so you can move draft picks here. And so you do have control over your draft picks. That is a huge plus. Next, you're talking about 2 players on their rookie scale contract. And so not bad there, especially if these players blossom to do very well. And so that leads me to the point here with this ranking and just really, is it working? And so right now I could say, I just don't think that it's necessarily trending towards working. And I'm not going to say that it's trending towards where it's not fixable either. And so it's in a place right now where it's more so head scratching for me, because there are some things that the team has done as far as, like I said, getting younger. You got your picks back and you got some young talent back, because I do think that with Modest Buzelis, you probably have something with him. I do think that he's set to take off here this next season. I really do. I know there's some people that are skeptical about that, but just Modest Buzelis and his approach to the game, I think that he's a sure bet to do something here for the Chicago Bulls. And then when you look at Noah Asenge, and so what really makes me confident in him is when you hear about his mindset being maybe similar to Modest Buzelis and his approach to the game. Like, I feel very confident in saying that he's probably going to, I think, hit his peak more so than not. I think that he's a guy that is going to find a way to get to his best self as a player. And then, who knows with Lachlan Ubrick, but I get the point of the draft pick here. You're trying to go ahead and perhaps, get you some size. Maybe he pans out or whatnot. But, for the most part, I think you got some solid young players. You got to see what's going to happen with them. But after that, then you start to look at the other pieces that the Bulls have. And so, with Josh Giddey, certainly I think it's a young piece that you can be excited about. And the way that you have your playing style set up, it definitely seemed like that fit. And I think that Josh Giddey can definitely take a step forward. With Kobe White, I do expect for him to take a step forward in this contract year. I think that now he has a role and it's constant. And I think that he can now settle into that role. And he's going to be dependent on to be really an elite scorer in all kinds of levels. Like, he's going to have to get to the bucket. He's going to have to be good in the mid-range. He's going to have to be good from deep. And he's really going to have to be a guy that you can get him the basketball, and just when you're in the half court set, he can get you a bucket. So hopefully he becomes more reliable in that sense. And then next, when you look at a guy like Ayo Dosunmu, who is also in his contract year, and so we know how good he is defensively. I think that he's going to have a chance to really show how good he is as a two-way player. And I do think that he's going to be extra motivated, especially after coming off the shoulder and this really having a tough season, because this is the least amount of games that Ayo Dosunmu has played. He is in a contract year, and so I definitely expect for him to turn up here this upcoming season. You have to get somewhat excited about Isaac Okoro and him coming over and the potential of him being able to maybe take off in a new role, because he's going to be dependent on a lot more than he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so you have some upside there. And I think that AK has gone out and he's gotten players that have been experienced and everything else. But what I worry about with this team and their rebuild and retool, and I wonder if it's more of the same, because you still haven't gone out and you haven't stacked up additional draft capital. And so this kind of goes into what was mentioned there with Patrick Williams. I just think at some point in time, if this franchise is going to ultimately turn it around, you need to figure out a way to get a franchise player. And I think that the way you get to a franchise player is you have to have multiple bites at the apple. And so can Modest Buzelis become that? Sure. Could Kobe White become that? Absolutely. He could. It's possible. But you need to give yourself, as many chances as you can to find a franchise player. And so, just throwing out a scenario here, I'm not saying that the Bulls are going for a top 5 pick or anything like that, but how quickly would the franchise turn around if they were to have a couple picks in the first round? And so I'm just saying, like, what if they had pick, 10, and then they had pick 15 for the next couple seasons or something like that? Just saying that. So I think that even something like that small change could maybe turn your franchise around, because there's a chance that you may get a hit there. And then also, too, what happens is, if the other players that I mentioned, whether it's Ayo Dosunmu, if you keep him, and these other players like Kobe White and Josh Giddey, you're able to keep that together, and these guys blossom, suddenly you're in a great situation because you've hit on the draft. And now that's not even counting for if you have additional picks that you can use maybe in the next year's draft or something like that. Now you can say, okay, talent is definitely developed here. Maybe I can go ahead and package up picks and get a more proven player to go with these guys to push them over the hump. And so that's why it's important to go out there and get multiple draft picks. And you don't want to be in situations where you continue to do these 1-for-1 swaps and you're not getting any type of draft picks back and they're really lateral moves. And because of that, that's the stuff where you wonder about the Bulls and if they're really making progress here, because the team continues to really overvalue assets. And so we've seen that a couple different times, because when you look at the situation with Patrick Williams, I think that the team really bid against themselves. I think that also that could probably be true in the second contract, or the contract that they gave Vooch when they re-signed him. And then also too, the trade talk that we've heard, like, there was the rumor out there that maybe the Bulls could have moved Lonzo Ball and got some additional for first round draft capital here, and they didn't do it. And so stuff like that, where it's like, if you really want to progress the team, you're going to have to make moves like that. And so if you're modeling what you want to do with your team, and you're looking at, say, like OKC, or you're looking at the Pacers, or really anybody else that's kind of made that jump, you have to value the draft capital. You have to know when to come off of assets and things like that. And I think that you have to take calculated risk. And so we'll see really if this plan is going to work out, because it's going to get interesting, especially coming up this year, because if the Bulls do want to keep Ayo Dosunmu and they want to keep Kobe White, then, these guys are not going to be in restricted free agency. Like, they are headed to outright free agency. And I said this even in yesterday's video, there's a chance that these guys may decide that they want to go somewhere where the plan maybe makes a little bit more sense. Maybe it's a little bit more of a win now situation. And so they may factor that in. And there's a chance that these guys walk for absolutely nothing. And so I hope that the Bulls are able to figure this thing out and continue to build it. But if you're planning on getting these guys back, you had better make sure that you're setting them up for future success, and also too for the team for future success, because it could be something that hurts the Bulls' plans if these guys end up walking out the door on you. And then lastly, when you're talking about the Bulls and just like the rebuild and the progress and stuff like that, this kind of goes back to some of the stuff that I was talking about in yesterday's video with Coach Billy Donovan and the extension there, and just wondering that it just seems like with all the other coaches that got let go, that had won NBA championships or had maybe more success in the NBA, and then you come to conclusions and you get a multi-year deal with Billy Donovan, it just kind of symbolizes that as a franchise, you feel good with where you're at. And so if you feel good with what you're at, and, right now we continue to see play-in performances and things like that, I'm not sure that you can necessarily say that that's been progress. And so I just think at some point in time, the Bulls are going to have to shake it up. And so I say it all the time. Look, if you continue to do the same things that you've always done, you'll continue to get the same things that you've always got. And you have to ask yourself, is that enough? And I'm not sure a play-in situation is enough. And so you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking here. Do you agree with this ESPN article that lists the Chicago Bulls 11th on the list as far as the rebuild is concerned? Like I said, make sure you go out there and you check this out, because behind the Bulls, you have the Sacramento Kings, you have the Pelicans, and then you have the Phoenix Suns, and just some of the teams that are ahead of the Chicago Bulls. You have the Portland Trailblazers, you have Toronto, then you also have Brooklyn, Utah is up there, and then you have Charlotte, and then it's Washington as well. And so just to list a couple teams that are ahead of that. And so definitely make sure you head over to ESPN.com and check this out. But let me know in the comments, guys, what you guys are thinking. Are the Bulls making progress with their rebuild, retool, or is it much of the same? And so as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.